Good morning. I actually tried to film this on YouTube twice, and it flipped me off the screen and made me have to start over again, writing the date, the title, and then the topic. So I said, screw it. I'm just going to talk to you here in my backyard on Zoom, and then I'll have Christina upload it into YouTube. Hi, my name is Tantra Mott. I took that name because I swam with a wild dolphin for 5 years. And at the end of the time of swimming with him, when I knew I wouldn't be swimming with fungi again, I heard this name. It wasn't like I wanted to have a title or even notoriety, because there was something in the name that gave me access to something that little did I realize would unfold into time. So that's one little vignette of my past that leads to this conversation today. Another vignette is I was in 2009. I think fungi was probably in the 1990s. But in 2009, I met some beings above the sky in Shasta, thousands and thousands of faces of beings. And when these things happen to you, you get a little warped in the head for a minute. But the instruction was to show up. Would I show up the next year with 15 people who turned out to be 33 to create a dimensional relationship with these beings we call the Mimsies. When I was driving home from that event, I got a download, a structural download in my brain of matrix building. I could see the matrices in the ethers that extended from Shasta out over the ocean, north, south, and following where I was traveling, I could see it unfolding into Chaco Chaco. I don't know if that's the name of it. That city, I was thinking of Chaco Canyon, and then on into the Sierras and beyond. So that was 2010. And I got a new mind, a mind that now lets me participate in my own work, but also with others to participate in quantum fields and matrix building and other terminologies, but still building etheric structures within which new futures can rise. What is an etheric structure? I think we have a really easy way to describe that to you. We'll take Jesus. Jesus had two statements we know that he made. One was follows upon me. One is love thy neighbor as thyself. The other one was turn the other cheek. These were energetic principles, operating states that by doing these two things, becoming these two things, not just mechanically, but literally by being these two things, paradise could rise, a paradise could rise. If you read the Quran, Muhammad also gave the structure of a matrix. And if people paid attention, had the mind where they could pay attention to being operational. This is also true in Eastern tradition, although I'm not Eastern tradition. I was raised Christian. But if in these energetic fields, these are energies. Love thy neighbor as thyself is a way to be in touch with a certain energy. Turn the other cheek as a way to be in touch with a certain ether, a certain energy. And you can see that when you don't hold to your direct link with creation, and you don't operate in the beingness of those energies, and you begin to become more people-centric, like people have to love thy neighbor as thyself, people have to turn the other cheek, or people, it all starts to degrade because it's in the thingness, this mental mindset that a lot of people are talking about right now, where we're separated from the world around us because we've made everything into a thing, and we've learned how to interact with that thing, which is not a relational field. It's not about being in a relationship with anything. So that's the simple way to say it. And as you can see, some aberration occurred where this love thy neighbor as thyself and turn the other cheek is not an operating state that most of the Christian world exists in. And this is also true for other domains, but I'm going to use my own history for this conversation. These are ancient worlds that operated on behalf of life, and what had us exist as whole. They knew they were part of everything and everything was part of them. They honored and respected that if they touched another in a harmful way, they were harming themselves. They knew it was second nature. It was the norm. And every human being that watches this probably remembers something like this, because we could not remember it if it didn't exist. We just couldn't. So after Shasta and after I got this matrix building mind, I kind of went back to probably other realms of reality that I had once existed in. And I began to get like an architect will look at a piece of land, and there'll be a mindset that forms about how to put structure in that allows for a house to be built in a particular manner. And so they can be useful in a particular way. So for me, the mindsets were in the ethers, like the Christ and Muhammad and Buddha, and they were drawing these structures of relatedness with creation from etheric realms, from realms that where everything existed in what I call a paradise, a warm and friendly place. And it's all over the place. I mean, we read it in books. We love to see these things in movies. We love the music that elicits these etheric energies that we all carry and we all exist in. But more importantly, these were once social structures for this conversation. So I have been working on this all night in my mind because I wanted to thank the people who participated, even if it was just for a moment, participated in 3 specific matrices that came down from the opportunity. Remember, creation is not separate from you. When you begin to formulate something, like when you begin to formulate a relationship with someone, it's two-sided. The two of you decide what the structure of that relationship is going to be. Well, we do that with creation also, or we once did at least. So the first matrix that was formed after Shasta was called the spirals of beings. And it wasn't random. My terminology wasn't random. I had, since a child, human beings had looked like double vortexes, a tornado spinning this way and a tornado spinning that way. And the Merkaba in the center. But I didn't know any of those terms at the time. So the purpose of the years, the 7 years 10 years, 2014, 7 years. Yes, 7 years was to achieve an etheric matrix. This is what's so beautiful. Human beings think they're form, but they're only forming. That they're never solid form. Nothing's solid. Form draws itself from the ethers. It creates itself from the energy fields of creation. So we can do that. We once were very capable of doing that. And so I set up this offer. I did it through time and money. So whoever could afford 1 meeting, 1 weekend, 2 meetings, 3 meetings, and then people who met with me 1 weekend, 2 weekends, 3 weekends, and eventually 4 weekends. Because we bring existence into time. There is no time past here. We bring existence. We are responsible for time. It's part of our living matrix here. But the foundation of that matrix was intimacy. Sorry, that's not true. It was vulnerability, transparency, vulnerability and transparency. I think there was one more, but I don't remember. But it was because in those energies of vulnerability and transparency, this aspect of being their being, in full visibility of what we were sharing and what we're making transparent about our lives, what we're being vulnerable about our lives, ties us into the juice of love, ties us into the juice of being with another in the field. And in that juice, certain structures of engagement and certain structures of interaction begin to form that are basically user friendly. They are, it doesn't mean nobody gets mad at each other, and it doesn't mean that they don't take themselves away because it's just too hard to be with each other right at the moment. But the commitment to practicing transparency and vulnerability begins to erode separation. It begins to erode the activity of existence that has made us separate from each other, separate from life, and separate from ourselves. So that, but it's also a container. And at some point, which is probably Nassim Haramein could describe this better than me, but at some point there's a coherency. Everything becomes self-generative. It begins to generate the energy in the ethers. You can feel it, like you can feel it go into the energy of consciousness again, the energy of where form forms. And I'm doing the short version of this. So, because I'm really doing this for the people in the field of Tantra Mat, so they can understand that I'm not like closing something down and trashing it like we trash each other, but that everything has built with everything else. It creates a new opening, a higher etheric quantum possibility. And human beings were who used to do this, not gurus. Human beings knew how to do this. Now we have gurus that help us remember, and we have different light workers and magi's that help us remember. But each of us has it. There's not one of us. I actually had a mammy, and her name was Fanny, and she was about 2C. She was about 6'3", I think, towered over all of us. And she built a matrix in our household. Our household was very shallow, and in regard to my mother, very cruel. But she called it the household. When she came to work there, she called us the household. But when Fanny was there, her way of being, her tender care, her tending to the incredibly traumatic realm that I existed in there, it just kept flavoring the energy enough that I never fell victim to some of the really bad stuff that happened there, because she had this matrix that she operated in in a beingness she called the household. And you could tell she was unshakable in it. Wasn't about moving people around or telling people what they're doing or trying to fix them or trying to make them be a way you wanted them to be. Particularly my mother, she wasn't going to change much. But that energy that Fanny brought, everything changed when she was there. It's like we were swimming in a different kind of water. We were being in a different kind of world. And it helped me tolerate what wasn't that sometimes when she was gone. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not asking you to learn this. I have a very small group of people, because you can do more if there's less process in a group. If you have a group of people that can become related, interactive, interrelated, and feel the beauty of what we call shared field, realizing that we share something, we begin to realize the other person is experiencing it too. so we don't feel isolated and alone. And then we begin to open up into experiences of reality that just don't happen when everything's separate from everything else. And everything is not operating on behalf of everything else. And everything is not related to everything else as part of a greater whole. So the spirals are being generated, something that just got put back in the ethers. It was other people work with the ethers. I work with what human beings remember inside of themselves, these etheric territories that as they remember and they recall them and they become operative, like naturally in them, they literally go back into the etheric territories that once existed here before those matrices were destroyed, so that human beings probably could be enslaved in a not so user-friendly natures of existence. So that went on until 2020, right when, everything started to hit the fan. And then I did built another matrix, took the energetic field, the substance, the energy that comes from the beauty of creation, the chi, the prana, you can call it a million things, love, tenderness, beauty. And I opened up 7 levels of consciousness, which I did over 7 months, and others joined us. Others felt called to this because it isn't a matter of learning something in order to survive. It's about returning to something that is our true nature of being. So that 7 months occurred, and there's a phenomenon of establishing things in the ethers. People really know about it with gurus. When they're in the presence of a guru, they're happy, they're enlightened, they feel they can be cathartic because the guru holds an etheric territory and a matrix. And whatever the guru is talking to you about, it's because that's the realm of existence within which they dwell. And when you are with them, you get to be with that energy field. You get to be in that ether. And those ethers are where form forms. It's where we formulate existence and we formulate matter. And it's in the quantum mind, the survival mind that human beings have been forced into doesn't give much access to it, except through principles and values. Those are modern words for tapping the ethers. So the last one, the field of Tantra Mat, got formed. And there's sort of spirals within spirals within spirals for those of you that one builds the opening for the other, for the next one. It's just like we're standing on ground. And if the ground underneath that ground wasn't there, we would fall through. So it's like building these layers of vibrational frequency into higher and higher frequency bases within which new futures can be born, which is the intent of the work that I've been doing here quite successfully. But see, it's not measured by the number of participants. It's measured by the quality of participation. And it's also measured by the ability for human beings not to isolate themselves, but the beginning of human beings to be able to come together on behalf of all life and feel coherent, feel shared listening, feel connected, feel that not like so much of, let's say, Christian churches, although I'm referring generally to all religions, have become social events. They're not coming in the principles and the values of love, and not all of them. I'm sure some are, and so that those become the ethers that feed into the human system. So in the field of Tantra Mat, it was, I had swum with fungi, and so the general phenomenon was this download I got from fungi of Tantra and Mat. But then it began to be visible. It began to have evidence of there was something happening in the planetary cosmological, so above, so below. And then you set up environments within which we can be part of that creation. We can be part of that being part of the building blocks of the creation. The language of consciousness was formed, but the hard part is they're teaching places, but they're mostly places to give you access to the original nature of your design. And that original nature of original design is part of what generates etheric energies within which form can occur, different kinds of form, different kinds of structure. So the principles of Tantra is so above, so below, the marriage, the intercourse of so above, so below, the intimacy, the affinity, the dance, the magic, the wonder of being returned to our direct link with creation, regardless of what we call it. We call it God or Jehovah or Jesus or life or source, but it's not outside of us. It's we are it, and it is us, and we lost that mind. But so this last matrix was restored into the ethers. This mind of a field phenomenon of so above, so below, and Mat principles, balance, harmony, symmetry, proportion, and grace. And it isn't like you enforce it. You seed it and you live it, and you see and you can tell where we call it strength, stamina, capacity. Like I just went through something that I didn't have the strength, stamina, capacity for. And out of going through it and living it, I have now more wisdom. I have now more consciousness. I have now more relatability. I have more interactive, interrelated consciousness about how to deal with what's happening right now for us as human beings. We're beginning to derobe. We're beginning to feel the deep wounds, and before we repaired those wounds to survive here, now we're going back through the wounds, back through the fear, back through the emotions, the aberrated emotions, and we're to get to the other side where they have no hold on us anymore, and we can be back in the principles of the field of Tantra Mat, where our affinity, intimacy, vulnerability, transparency, and to some level authenticity. But that's a very small piece of the work because we don't know ourselves yet. We don't know ourselves in a direct link with creation. We don't know ourselves as expressions of existence itself. We know ourselves as stick figures with properties, but we're getting there, and it's exciting. So this is to the people all these years that have participated in building these matrices that are now part of built back into the ethers of consciousness here on the planet, and will over time, they're undisturbable because nobody has to believe in them. Their energy feels like Jesus evoked an energy field. And when he evoked that energy field, people are paying attention to love everywhere nowadays. They're looking for love in all the wrong places and some of the right places. But it evokes a craving. And then it's what we start to watch and what we start to pay attention to. And remember that time only exists here. Creation has forever. And the planet and the cosmos and all the beings in the cosmos that love us and we once loved them, all that's active now. And then this deep, what we call the feminine, the planet herself, this feminine being, and I'm not speaking feminist, this feminine type of being that's now emergent. So I just am so excited because I'm not the only one. Many of us are building back etheric realms, etheric matrices within which human beings can begin to experience reality differently. It's not the doing or the topic of reality. It's the energy. And the energy we have in regard to reality is our emotion, whether it brings us joy or love or fear or happiness. These are ethers we carry within ourselves. These are ethers that are not attached to circumstances. They're attached to natures of being. And those natures of being are beginning to rise. So I wanted to make this recording as a thank you for the people who participated in Shasta, in the trips to Ireland, the Spirals of Being, the long time ago Spirit Hour, 7 levels of consciousness, and now the field of Tantra Mat. And there's at some point these energies, like the color yellow becomes yellow. But before, it just couldn't stay yellow. And that's the best I can describe it. But over this past, and you always let go of it, because if you make it into a thing, then it loses its juice. It loses its life force energy. You let it go, and because now you're part of it and it's part of you. And then it can go out into, because we are a collective consciousness. We're not isolated consciousnesses. And then it can make its way out into the consciousness to touch others, because we haven't captured it and put it in a form that makes us tell other human beings how they have to be to belong to that form. I know it's a little complex. I came with this mind that, the people have lived with me, but wherever I came from, wherever I existed and still exist, just didn't go through a lot of the trauma that this planet went through, and particularly the human form. Even though my biology and my incarnate memory is at the effect of what happened here, my consciousness isn't. My consciousness remembers paradise, remembers, I don't know, dragons and apple trees and the joy of the sky and the wonder of existence, and where everything was operationally like that. But we do live in matrices. If we could stop this screen is nothing but particles. And why I can form in front of you is because they have a matrix that allows a visual called me to show up in front of you. Everything's matrices. Everything is an infrastructure within which existence has a place in matter. Everything. And if we keep believing that something is formed, and we keep giving it energy that it's real, it stays real. But the beauty of it is the more digital we become, the more we're across the world and interactive with each other, the more we begin to remember. And there's another gift in human beings. Sorry, early morning fall. There's another phenomenon in human beings called recall. And we're just on the border of recall. And I think I'm going to add this today. It's a little beyond what I was going to say. When you work in the ethers, you're not looking at what people are doing or being. You're looking at strength, stamina, capacity for existence. So there's like this border around humanity. I call it betrayal, abandonment, rejection. And we remember this experience. We remember feeling betrayed. We remember feeling rejected. We remember feeling abandoned. There's a whole bunch of stuff about what happened. But what's beyond that border is where I came from and what I'm building here. Not that my humanity doesn't have to mature and come out of the trauma as everybody else's does. But I remember, and I'm not the only one. But there is some kind of cohesive means something inseparable starting to occur. There's some kind of coherence, ability to hear out beyond betrayal, rejection, and abandonment. Out beyond all right and wrongdoing, as Rilke would say. We're at this really delicate forming place. Really delicate. So the field of Tantra not only is operative, but it has this community that is formed within that matrix, and that community will continue. It will. And because it's operative and it's a shared field, and the next recursion is so many human beings come together because they need to survive together, or they need to believe together, or they need to have agreements together. But we're going back to, I just love to be in your company. I just love to be in your company. So that matrix for me to tend to is complete. It's operative. Things have been born out of it. Things have, the coherence, the power of the higher frequency level has contributed to other projects, to other people, and to other groups that are operating on behalf of the return of the evolutionary capacity of a human being to remember itself right. And I'm moving on. I'm moving on to my next matrix. And not that I won't be related to, I'm not leaving. I'm only moving into the next turn of the spiral. The next turn of the spiral. You never leave anything. Everything you've ever done becomes the building blocks of what's coming next. But something's forming, something's in formation. So this is what I was explaining logistically to the people in the field of Tantra Mat. But I wanted to do them the honor, and you the honor that are listening from the field of Tantra Mat, of really realizing and letting in the power of the beauty of the ethers of transparency, affinity, vulnerability. Did I say transparency? And that you can live, you can breathe it now. You can, it's part of the natural state of your existence. It's also part of the pain of existence where it's missing. But when we are in touch with something, it influences everything else. The need for love influences the capacity for love. The need for affinity influences the capacity for affinity. The need for vulnerability influences the power of vulnerability. These are ethers. These are ways of being. These aren't survival models. They're creation models of being. So that's what I wanted to share today, because I know I operate in a medium that's, except for quantum scientists like Nassim and other quantum people that design quantum structures, pretty much in the regular world. I don't deal with trauma recovery. I deal with rebuilding the structure of consciousness within which trauma has no place. Stub toe trauma, but not trauma that persists over time. So thank you for your time, and thank you if you listened all the way through to the end. I had a mentor. His name was Brian Christopher. He's still around. He's in LA. When I was in my 20s. And I remember so much sitting there listening to him for a long time. I didn't understand a word he said, but something in me knew that he was talking about something. He was talking about light worlds, light frequencies, and realms that existed in those light frequencies. So he's part of why I can do what I do, and I'm capable of what I'm capable of. I was his student. And now I'm 77 years old. This might stay my home. We'll see what happens. And I'm seeing the glimmer. I'm seeing the glimmer of the etheric realms of human beings within which there's affinity and love and tenderness, and the ability to be with each other's pain in a moment and know that's not who they are, and to be with them so they can make it through to the other side, where that pain can release and be gone because another human being was there to say it's okay. My son Jeremy, he died when he was quite young. I think I'll end with honoring him. All these interactions in my life my angel, Jeremy, he definitely didn't come from here. He came from someplace else to make sure I had an experience that I could no longer back away from, that I would become part of, just like you have experiences that you become part of, and they begin to live through you and you begin to live them. But at the time in Tennessee, our church was integrated, which was rare. And the schools weren't integrated yet. So there was the teacher told me later, because Jeremy died when he was 5. I heard all these amazing Jeremy stories at that time. The stories in my book, You as the Mind of Creation. You know, if you just read that book and don't try to match it to what you presently believe, something extraordinary will happen for you. Something beyond the present mind that you exist in. Something like affinity, intimacy, those kind of things. Those ethers wake up in your auric field and in your mind, even in the etheric nature of your mind, your sentience. But his teacher told me at daycare, told me that she walked out the door and this little black boy was throwing all the coats at Jeremy and called him honky, which is a not nice name for white people. And I remembered it because Jeremy came home that day and asked me what a honky was. And I said, it's what happens when somebody's in a lot of pain. They call people names and they say bad things to them because they just hurt so bad. They just got to get the hurt out of them. So the teachers, unbeknownst to me, the mother came when Jeremy was in a coma, and she told me the rest of the story. That day, she had heard Jeremy, and the teacher heard Jeremy say to the little boy the next day when the little boy was pushing him and yelling at him about being a honky. And Jeremy says, you can call me honky as long as you want to, until all that pain is out of you. And she said she couldn't believe it. Her son went to bed that night and he woke up just different. She had her son back. And every night of the 10 days that Jeremy was in a coma, 10 o'clock at night, that mother and her son were outside for me. So I'm not talking about mental structure. I'm talking about intimacy that lets you cry when you're hurt. Fear that lets you be afraid when you're afraid. Laughter when sometimes it's just inane what we laugh at. It's in the emotional realm, and that's what I'm taking on next. The emotional realm is the eternal moving through the physical form of the human being. It's formulating. It's not in form yet. Like at one point, the spirals of being were formulated. The 7 levels of consciousness were formulated. This field of Tantra Mat was formulated. And the 3 structures that will stay in the field of Tantra Mat are the guardians and the magi. People that are evolving as part of their etheric self. And that etheric self needs work. I don't mean it needs to be worked on. It needs a place to express itself and be what it came here to be. Our human secular self is not our only self, people. We have selves that are quantum natures of consciousness, archetypes, guardians, magis, beloveds, lovers. Look at the tarot deck. We're good. I do think the next 4 years are going to be rough because our emotional plane, as was said in the prophetics, the emotional plane is waking up. It's flushing out. Everything we didn't dare feel because we had to survive, we'll start to feel now because the ethers, not necessarily the circumstances, our society is failing, but the ethers are gathering on behalf of life. The greater realities of which we're a part, the beings that love humanity. And those of us that remember being loved or will awaken, just like Daniel in the lion den and the boys in the fiery furnace. It's the ability to take the journey that's before us, the commitment to the journey, not having something outside of us solve it, but to become of it, to become of the emergent nature of self that has laid buried inside of every human being for millennia. And it's awakening. Magic. Paradise. And hard. You know, I went through this amazing emotional catharsis out of nowhere. It's like with the circumstances that does not fit the amount of emotion I was going through. And I just let it rip. I trusted my world. I trusted that people would hold me in my pain and let me follow this through line of terror and fear and vulnerability and patheticness and embarrassment that I found myself in. And they just kept being there for me, like we all be there for each other. It's part of what we do as human beings, is we be there for each other so we can get to the other side of something. But I realize what's before us now is this through line of terror. It's like we're going back through these suppressed emotions. We're going back through these memories. We may not have the memory, but we have the impact of the experience. And our systems are re-choosing. They're just re-choosing. But it's not a personality thing. It's a systemic thing. It's an emotional, it's the emotions alive and reawakening and coming back online and all their fervor. And a little bit embarrassing for us highly structured mental bobblehead human being that we've become. I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but not too much. I'm very excited about what's coming up. I'm so thrilled. And I'm very aware that I don't operate in the structures of reality that people promote here, because I just think we weren't born to be trauma-centric. We're born to be love-centric, joy-centric. But we're also born to, when we're sad, we cry. When we're mad, we yell. We're busy lifing and not talking. We're busy lifing. All right. Thank all of you up until now. It's been a great trip. I'm very thrilled where we've gotten to. I pray with all my heart we don't measure ourselves against what humanity can presently hear, but we measure ourselves with the quality of life that we're attaining in each of our unique and essential relationship with creation. Namaste.